Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Odyssey Recaps, just the Tea edition. Today we are recapping book 14, titled by Emily Wilson as A Loyal Slave. Now, just before we start, I just want to give you guys a quick heads up that this chapter is confusing as heck because Odysseus has been transformed and disguised by Athena into an elderly beggar, and throughout the chapter, he talks to people about himself as though he's someone else. So, to avoid confusion, for the rest of this episode, I'm going to be calling Odysseus when he is in disguise Odysseus and using his government name Odysseus when people are talking about the man, the myth, the legend, the missing king. Okay, got that? Odysseus, missing king of Ithaca. Odysseus is Odysseus' drag name / disguise character's name, who has a frustratingly complex and rich backstory. So, this chapter starts out with Odysseus following Athena's advice and heading to the house of his old slave and the swineherd to his pigs, a man named Eumaeus. Eumaeus is a slave of Odysseus's, but he's also a fan. And when Odysseus gets to his house, within 3 sentences, this man is telling him how much he misses his beloved master and just wishes he would come back. He invites Odysseus into his home for a meal because Zeus says to look after strangers, and Eumaeus is not about to piss off Zeus, and also he's just a really nice guy. While he's prepping some food, he tells Odysseus how sad he is without his master, and how his master is just the best slave owner ever. And even if Eumaeus could go back home to his own family, he wouldn't because he loves his master that much. In fact, he sees him more like a brother than a master. Which makes me think that Homer, or whoever really wrote this poem, was a slave owner because, sure, Jan, someone would for sure rather stay a slave than go back home. That's totally a real thing that happened at all ever in the world. Anyway, then Eumaeus goes on a rant about the suitors and how they're destroying his master's home and eating all his food, and also like Loki planning to murder his master's sad son so that one of them can bang his master's hot wife. He feeds Odysseus, and Odysseus listens to him be sad about his master being gone some more, and then he asks who his master is. Eumaeus tells him in a roundabout way that he's the dead hero, Odysseus. Odysseus is all like, I bet he'll be back soon. He's probably closer than you think, tee. And Eumaeus is like, please stop. We are all so sick of people telling us he's coming home. I've fully given up. He is a dead man. Fish are eating his bones somewhere. I know it. And then Eumaeus makes the huge mistake of asking to hear Odysseus' story and how he wound up in rags in Ithaca. And guys, this question basically triggers an unskippable cutscene where Odysseus tells the most insanely complex story ever. It's just crazy. In fact, it's so crazy that some scholars think that maybe it's referencing other versions of the Odyssey, or like things that were cut out from the version we have now. If you want to hear more about these theories, head to my below the surface recaps, or just ask in the comments for a longer explanation, and I'll do a separate video because it is intense. Anyway, for now, buckle up because we are on the train to Crazy Town and there will be no stops. So, Odysseus says that he was born in Crete to a slave woman and her master, a wealthy man who had lots of other sons, but who treated Odysseus the same as his legitimate sons, even though he was the child of a slave. But when Papa Slave Master dies, his half-brothers just take all the inheritance and only give Odysseus like a tiny sliver of like really shitty land. And they're like, sucks to suck. But they severely underestimated how much riz this man has, and he managed to snag a super rich wife. But even though he had money, he found out that he just really did not enjoy raising kids or keeping house or being on a farm, which, guys, this is why we don't marry for money while super young. Just don't do it. Find your passions first. Anyway, it works out for Odysseus because he finds out that he loves fighting and war and killing and sailing and fighting. And he manages to do so much fighting that he gets a lot of money and a reputation. But this backfires on him when the Trojan War happens because then all the people of Crete are like, OMG, Odysseus is so good at war. He should absolutely go and help the Greeks and fight alongside the Cretan king. Odysseus does not want to do this, but was basically like peer pressured into going. So they fight for 10 years, sack the city, commit tons of war crimes, and in leaving, piss off the gods. But Odysseus doesn't piss them off as much as the others. So he does get to go home to his wife and kids, but he hates it, and he only stays for a month before he gets itchy feet and like desperately needs a vacay and is basically forced to go traveling, this time to Egypt. So he sets off for Egypt with a fleet of ships and a crew, and they get there just fine, and Odysseus tells his men to chill while he goes and scouts ahead to see where they are. Unfortunately, the men have zero chill and immediately start murdering men, burning fields, and enslaving women and children. The nearest city hears the screams of all these like poor people and are like, WTF, and they send an army to kick out these psychos. Odysseus comes back in the middle of this battle and is also like, WTF. They're quickly overwhelmed, and Odysseus' men are either killed or enslaved themselves, which, like, karma. Odysseus is like, ooh, not for me, thanks, and surrenders and begs the king to help him. The king is like, sure, why not? And takes him in, even though the Egyptian people are like, no, we'd like to kill him too. He's kind of their leader. But the king refuses and protects Odysseus. So Odysseus lives there for a while and amasses some wealth again, but then a wily, sneaky Phoenician conman comes along and tells him that if he just comes with him, they can go back to Phoenicia and then Libya and they'll do some trading and get tons of money together. So, like typical crypto bro, but like ancient crypto. Odysseus thinks this sounds rad, so he pieces out of Egypt and heads off with this conman to Phoenicia. But once they leave harbor, Zeus is like, ew, no, and chucks a lightning bolt at the ship and kills everyone except Odysseus, who he leaves alive and clinging to the mast. Odysseus clings to that mast for 10 days before washing up in a place called Thesprotia, where a prince finds him washed up on the beach like Ariel in The Little Mermaid and is like, OMG, a salty man, better bring him home ASAP. So he like scoops Odysseus up and takes him back to his castle to meet his dad, the king. Once again, all these people help Odysseus, and while he's recovering from his latest adventure, they tell him all about the amazing Greek fighter Odysseus, who is just left, but is for sure super alive and healthy and sexier than ever and so smart and also just like very much alive, and has just popped out to go find a holy talking oak tree and ask it if Zeus is done being mad at him and can he go home to Ithaca yet. Odysseus doesn't want to hang around and meet this sexy, super smart, and again, very much alive Odysseus. So the king tells his men to take him to Dulichium. But once they set out, the crew was like, or we can sell him as a slave and pocket the money. So they swap his nice clothes for rags and tie him up. But then they stop for the night at Ithaca so they can try the local cuisine. And while they're out to dinner, a god loosens Odysseus' ties and he escapes into the night and then winds up here. Eumaeus is like, okay, that was a lot of detail, and I'm sorry to hear about all your poor decisions, but please stop talking about Odysseus. He is for sure dead, so stop making up lies, please and thank you. Eumaeus explains that people just keep coming and telling him, and also Penelope and Telemachus, that Odysseus is alive and coming home soon, and it's never real, and everyone is just getting more and more depressed, and he personally has decided that he's just been burned like one too many times by all these like conmen, and that Odysseus is just super dead, and he's not going to listen to another word anyone has to say about his beloved master. Odysseus again is like, tee-hee, I bet he's super close and coming home. Lol, you can throw me off a cliff and murder me if I'm wrong. And Eumaeus is like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that, but I'm also not gonna believe you. Anyway, you've talked for so long that it's dinner time. I'm gonna go cook BRB. So Eumaeus cooks up some more pigs and does some sacrifices and offerings to the gods because he is not about to get barbecued by Zeus over some bacon. And then he serves up all of his workers and himself and Odysseus, giving Odysseus the best cut of meat because he's just like super nice like that. After they eat, Odysseus decides he wants to test Eumaeus just one more time for reasons. And he decides to manipulate this poor man into giving him his cloak, which why? He could have just asked for it. Anyway, he tells Eumaeus and everyone else at the table a story about how one night at Trojan War Camp, it was super cold, and he and a bunch of other men were hiding out with the sexy hero Odysseus, and they were sleeping in like a freezing marsh while they waited to ambush the Trojans, but OMG, he had forgotten his cloak, and it was super cold, so he went to the super sexy hero Odysseus, who is, again, for sure still alive, and was like, I forgot my cloak, and now I am shivering. And Odysseus, super sexily and cleverly, is like, don't worry, baby, I got you. And then he tells another soldier that he just needs him to run down to the ships and give Agamemnon like a little message. So the soldier runs off and leaves his cloak behind, and Odysseus snags it and is nice and warm and toasty all night long. Odysseus tells Eumaeus that he wishes he was still young and handsome because he's cold now. And if he was young and handsome and not like horrifyingly old, someone would give him a cloak because he's cold. Eumaeus is not an idiot and is like, do you want my cloak? And Odysseus is like, yes, please. So Eumaeus gives him his cloak and is like, please give it back tomorrow. I only have one thick winter cloak. I cannot lose it. And Odysseus promises to return it. Eumaeus then gives Odysseus his own bed and goes to sleep with the pigs in the yard. Odysseus is super happy and snuggles down in this poor man's bed to sleep. And that's where this convoluted and slightly bizarre chapter ends. Tune in next time to see what this rascal gets up to next. Also, is Telemachus still trapped watching the most toxic marriage breakdown of all time? Will Athena rescue him or grab some popcorn and stay to watch the fireworks? Let's find out. See you next time, guys.